During World War II, more than 16 million Americans served in uniform. Young men pulled from farms, factories, and small towns, shipped across the world into battle. But while bullets flew and history was made, there was one quiet struggle every soldier faced daily: mealtime. Far from home, with no kitchens or comforts, troops relied on government-issued rations, meals packed in tins, powdered in envelopes, or dehydrated beyond recognition. Designed for survival, not satisfaction, these foods were strange, gritty, and unforgettable. Some offered a rare taste of home. Others were so reviled they became military legends. And yet, every can, every pouch, every bite told the story of a nation at war. From powdered eggs and cold-baked beans to sweet spam soaked in applesauce, these weren't just meals, they were memories, frozen in time. In this episode, we're counting down 30 shocking meals American soldiers ate during World War II. Some comforting, some disgusting, and all part of the price of freedom. Number 1. Canned spaghetti with meat chunks. It looked like dinner. It even smelled a little like home. But one bite told a different story. For thousands of American GIs in Europe and the Pacific, spaghetti with meat chunks was one of the most recognizable and most controversial meals in their standard-issue ration kits. Designed to offer high calories and easy storage, this dish was packed into tin cans, sealed for long journeys, and handed out in field rations known as sea rations. The idea was simple: a pasta-based meal, fortified with protein, that could be eaten cold or heated over a small flame. But what arrived on the plate was something else entirely. The noodles were often overcooked and clumped together, swimming in a watery red sauce that barely passed for tomato. The meat? More like grayish lumps, mystery-textured, floating in the mix. Still, it was warm. It was filling. And for some soldiers, it was the closest thing they'd had to a hot meal in weeks. In muddy trenches and icy forests, even a spoonful of soggy pasta could remind a homesick private of Sunday dinners back in Brooklyn or Chicago. Others weren't so sentimental. It earned nicknames like GI lasagna and prison spaghetti, and some units would trade multiple cans of it just to get another helping of beans or stew. It wasn't gourmet, but it was nourishment. And sometimes that's all that mattered. But not every ration was as tolerable. In fact, some became outright legendary for how much soldiers hated them. Number 2. Powdered eggs. In the quiet moments before dawn, when the frost still clung to canvas tents and boots crunched over frozen dirt, there was one thing soldiers could count on: breakfast. But instead of sizzling bacon or fresh eggs from the farm, they got a yellow powder and a pot of boiling water. Powdered eggs, known officially as dried egg mix, were a wartime innovation born from necessity. Real eggs didn't travel well. They cracked, spoiled, and froze. But powdered eggs? They were light, shelf-stable, and easy to ship by the ton. Made by spray-drying thousands of eggs into a fine powder, the mix could be rehydrated into a kind of scrambled egg or something close to it. In theory, it was breakfast. In practice, it was more like yellow rubber. The texture was off, spongy, and sometimes grainy. The flavor ranged from bland to metallic. And no matter how much salt or pepper the cooks dumped in, the eggs never quite stopped tasting like the can they came from. Still, in the middle of a battlefield, even bad eggs beat an empty stomach. Some soldiers joked that they were eating the same egg mix every morning for 6 months. Others swore it doubled as shoe polish. But powdered eggs also represented something more: a military trying to keep its troops going with the tools it had. These weren't meals of luxury, they were meals of endurance. You didn't love them. You didn't even like them. But if you were lucky, you learned to swallow them with a smile. Unfortunately, not every breakfast item was quite so forgiving. Number 3. Spam with applesauce. In the humid jungles of the Pacific, far from home and even farther from a proper kitchen, American troops opened a can and discovered something unexpected. And next to it? Applesauce. Sweet meets salty. Pork meets puree. A pairing no one requested, but one that fed a generation at war. Spam, Hormel's iconic canned meat, had already become a household name by the time America entered World War II. It was cheap, packed with protein, and didn't spoil. But when you're shipping millions of cans overseas, variety matters. So someone, somewhere, decided to balance the salt of Spam with the sweetness of canned applesauce. To some soldiers, it worked. A strange kind of harmony in a tin, like Sunday pork chops and apple slices, if Sunday dinner came in a can and was eaten under fire. To others, it was a culinary crime. The sugary sauce soaked into the meat, giving it a texture some described as meat pudding. It was served cold more often than not, and with flies swarming your plate, it didn't exactly scream home. But in the middle of nowhere, with nothing else around, even Spam with applesauce could feel like a hot meal in a warm kitchen. It was one of those strange combinations that stuck in your memory, whether you liked it or not. And that's the thing about food in wartime: it wasn't just about taste. It was about survival, and sometimes, surprise. Of course, not every meal came with a sweet side. Some were just cold, and straight from the can. Number 4. Cold baked beans right from the can. There was no fire, no heat, no plates, just a spoon and a can of beans. In the mud-soaked trenches and forward positions, one of the most common and most unappetizing meals soldiers faced was a cold tin of baked beans, eaten straight from the can. Baked beans were part of the standard sea ration issued to troops across nearly every theater of the war. Technically, they were supposed to be heated, but in reality, there was often no time, no safe place, and no fuel to light a fire. So soldiers dug in cold. The beans were soaked in a sugary tomato sauce that congealed into jelly in colder weather. They stuck to the sides of the can. They were sometimes half-frozen, but they were high in calories and easy to eat on the move. Some GIs came to tolerate them. A few even liked them, but many couldn't stomach the texture, the way the sauce thickened, the metallic tang from the tin, or the faint smell of rust and wet socks. Yet they were reliable. Baked beans didn't spoil easily. They required no preparation, and they filled a hungry stomach faster than many other rations could. There was something strangely symbolic about that tin of beans. It wasn't warm, it wasn't fresh, but it got you through another night. And sometimes, that was the only thing that mattered. Still, there were worse things than cold beans. Much worse. Number 5. Dehydrated potatoes with meat flakes. Among the many strange creations to emerge from World War II's military kitchens, few sparked more confusion or disgust than dehydrated potatoes with meat flakes. It sounded promising on paper, a warm, filling meal of mashed potatoes and protein, easy to ship and quick to prepare. But what soldiers opened in their field rations was something far different. The potatoes arrived as a dry, flaky powder sealed in wax-lined packaging, needing only hot water to rehydrate, if hot water was even available. The meat flakes, meanwhile, were unidentifiable specks of dried protein, possibly beef, pork, or something in between, that floated like bits of damp cardboard once stirred in. The final product was a grayish, lumpy paste with the smell of canned dog food and the consistency of wet insulation. Some GIs joked it looked like it had already been eaten once. And yet, it was energy-dense and easy to digest, qualities that made it a battlefield staple, whether troops wanted it or not. In freezing weather, when hot meals were a rare comfort, even this slop could feel like a small mercy. But during hotter campaigns, especially in the Pacific, the rehydrated potatoes often spoiled quickly or clumped into gummy globs impossible to swallow. Veterans recalled chewing their way through half a mess tin just to keep from feeling faint. Others swore the meat flakes were best scraped off and discarded entirely. Still, in the chaos of war, a warm spoonful of anything, even this, was better than nothing. These kinds of meals didn't just test the palate, they tested morale. And like so many wartime rations, dehydrated potatoes with meat flakes reminded soldiers of the distance between them and the kitchens they left behind. A far cry from mom's mashed potatoes and gravy, this meal became one of the many quiet burdens they carried, and one of the many strange tastes that would linger in their memories long after the war was over. Number 6. Ham and lima beans, ham and mofos. Among all the meals American soldiers endured during World War II, none earned quite the same level of infamy or vulgar nicknames as ham and lima beans. Officially labeled as ham and lima beans on sea ration menus, this dish quickly became so despised by troops that it earned a less than polite moniker, ham and mofos. The name stuck, passed from one platoon to the next with a knowing grimace. On paper, it sounded hearty, chunks of ham mixed with protein-rich lima beans in a thick broth. But in reality, it was a mushy, greasy, pale green mess with a smell many GIs compared to old socks and wet cardboard. The texture didn't help. The ham was often fatty and rubbery, while the lima beans turned chalky or mushy, depending on the weather. Some soldiers claimed the dish was so repulsive, they'd rather go hungry. Others buried unopened cans in the mud or traded them for cigarettes, chocolate, or even enemy rations. And yet, despite its reputation, the meal kept showing up again and again, shipped in bulk due to its low cost, long shelf life, and decent nutritional value. For soldiers stuck in foxholes during bitter European winters or sweating in the tropics, it was a cruel reminder that the army didn't cook with comfort in mind. To this day, veterans who served still speak of ham and lima beans with a special kind of disdain, a culinary trauma that lingered long after the fighting stopped. But in a strange way, this hated ration bonded soldiers through shared suffering. Everyone had a ham and mofos story. And for some, laughing about it decades later became part of the healing. It wasn't just a meal, it was a test of endurance, a joke that never got old, and proof that, in wartime, even something as simple as dinner could leave a mark as lasting as battle itself. Number 7. Army-issue chocolate bar, Duration. To the untrained eye, it looked like a treat. A simple chocolate bar, tucked into a soldier's ration kit, promising a brief moment of sweetness amid the smoke and shellfire. But the truth about the Army's Duration chocolate bar was far less comforting. Designed not for enjoyment but for emergency survival, The D-Ration bar was created by the Army Quartermaster Corps in partnership with the Hershey Company. The requirements were specific. It had to be high in calories, resistant to heat, compact, and, perhaps most importantly, not so tasty that soldiers would eat it too quickly. What resulted was a dense, brown brick made from a mixture of chocolate, oat flour, sugar, and a hint of cocoa fat. It was nearly impossible to bite when cold, didn't melt in the desert heat, and had a bitter, pasty flavor that soldiers often compared to chewing on candle wax or dry clay. Many GIs described it as barely edible, and some joked that it could double as a weapon. But it served its purpose, delivering over 600 calories in a small bar, providing critical energy in life or death situations. Often issued in lifeboat kits or packed into emergency field rations, it wasn't a snack to be enjoyed, it was a last resort to keep a soldier on his feet when real food wasn't an option. Some tried softening it with hot water or shaving it into coffee just to make it go down easier. Others tossed it entirely, preferring to risk hunger. And yet, in its own harsh way, the D-Ration bar was a symbol of wartime ingenuity, engineered not for flavor, but for function. For those who carried it in their packs, it wasn't just a chocolate bar. It was a reminder that even the simplest comforts were rationed, redesigned, and repurposed in the name of survival. It looked like a luxury, but it tasted like the war itself, hard, bitter, and unforgettable. Number 8. Hardtack biscuits. By the time World War II rolled around, you might have thought the US military had left behind some of its oldest, most primitive field rations, but then came the return of hardtack. This dense, jaw-breaking biscuit had roots going all the way back to the Civil War and even earlier, when sailors and soldiers needed long-lasting food that wouldn't spoil. In World War II, it reappeared in some emergency and Navy-issued rations under different names like hardtack crackers or K-biscuits, but veterans instantly recognized them for what they really were: barely edible bricks. Made from nothing more than flour, water, and salt, and baked until they could probably stop a bullet, hardtack could survive almost anything: heat, moisture, mold, even time itself. Some soldiers soaked them in coffee or soup to soften the texture. Others broke them up and mixed them with jam or canned meat just to make them edible. And many, especially those serving on long naval missions or in remote outposts, simply broke their teeth trying. There were stories of hardtack so stale it had to be smashed with rifle butts before it could be eaten, and jokes that it had more in common with construction material than bread. Still, it did its job, keeping stomachs full and calories up when nothing else was available. In an age of powdered drinks and canned stew, this centuries-old ration was a stark reminder of just how basic and brutal military nutrition could be. To the men who ate it, hardtack wasn't just a food, it was a challenge, a punishment, and sometimes a punchline passed around during long, hungry nights. Yet for all its flaws, it filled a need when nothing else could. And like so many wartime meals, it stuck in the memory long after the guns fell silent. Not for its flavor, but for its sheer refusal to be forgotten. Number 9. Tinned sausage links in gravy. When soldiers first saw sausage links in gravy stamped on their ration cans, a few might have imagined something close to a comforting breakfast. Maybe even something that reminded them of home. But what they got was anything but. Inside the tin were several pale, wrinkled sausage links floating in a gelatinous brown gravy, slick with grease and often reeking of preservatives and metal. The sausages were usually made from processed pork, heavily salted, and packed so tightly that they fused together, resembling more of a solid tube than separate links. Heated up, the dish was marginally more edible, though the smell could be enough to clear a foxhole. Served cold, which was often the only option in combat zones, the texture became rubbery, and the gravy congealed into an unpleasant jelly that coated everything it touched. Soldiers described it as meat gum in motor oil, and it became one of the least traded, least favored options in the C-ration lineup. And yet, the Army kept it in circulation due to its high fat and protein content, essential nutrients for men on long marches or freezing in forward positions. Some GIs tried to drown it in mustard or hot sauce if they had any on hand. Others would mash it into hardtack to disguise the flavor or trade it off for anything, even a can of plain beans. But despite its grim appearance, the sausage links did what they were supposed to do: fill bellies, fuel muscles, and keep the war machine moving. Still, for those who opened that can under gray skies with growling stomachs, the disappointment was hard to forget. It was another moment in a long list of wartime letdowns, when what you read on the label gave you hope, and what you saw inside brought you right back to reality. Number 10. Vienna sausages and crackers. To most American soldiers during World War II, few meals captured the strange blend of hope and disappointment quite like a can of Vienna sausages and a side of military-issue crackers. At first glance, this combo looked like something out of a lunchbox, a quick snack, maybe even a comfort. The sausages were short, pale tubes of finely ground meat packed in a briny solution, meant to be eaten cold and straight from the can. Technically, they were a kind of soft pork paste formed into finger-sized links, but their bland, almost sponge-like texture left many GIs questioning whether they were meat at all. Paired with hard, dry crackers that crumbled more often than they crunched, the meal was oddly quiet. No heat, no cooking, no mess. Just open, chew, and try not to think too hard. Some soldiers got creative, stacking the sausage on the cracker like a mini sandwich, hoping the dry biscuit might mask the rubbery bite of the meat. Others doused them in whatever condiments they could scavenge: hot sauce, mustard, even canned cheese spread if they were lucky. But in the silence between battles, sitting alone in a trench or huddled beside a foxhole buddy, this humble pairing became something more. It was the kind of meal that asked for little but gave just enough. A few bites of protein, a little salt, and a moment of pause. For some, it was a familiar taste from back home, the kind of canned meat they'd grown up seeing in pantries during the Great Depression. For others, it was just another reminder of how far from home they really were. Yet, whether devoured in seconds or picked at slowly under the fading light of another uncertain day, Vienna sausages and crackers left a lasting impression, not because they were delicious, but because they were there when little else was. Number 11, liver loaf. Among the most mysterious and least mourned meals ever issued to American soldiers during World War II was a ration can labeled simply liver loaf. It didn't sound appetizing, and for most soldiers, it lived up to that low expectation. Packed into a small rectangular tin, this grayish-brown slab was made from processed beef liver and various meat byproducts, blended into a soft, pâté-like loaf that could be sliced, spread, or eaten cold with a spoon if no blade was available. Technically, it was nutritious. Liver is rich in iron, protein, and essential vitamins, but try telling that to a 19-year-old sitting in the mud with a can of what looked and smelled like dog food. The loaf had a heavy, metallic aftertaste, an oily sheen, and a pasty consistency that clung to the roof of the mouth. Most soldiers couldn't stomach more than a few bites before tossing it to the side, trading it off, or giving it to anyone with a stronger stomach, or less of a sense of smell. Some tried mixing it with crackers, cheese spread, or even mashed beans to cover the flavor. Others used it as a running joke: if the enemy doesn't get you, the liver loaf will. Its unpopularity became so widespread that the military quietly pulled it from later rations, making it one of the few meals in World War II history to be officially retired by taste alone. And yet, for the unlucky few who cracked open a can of liver loaf in some muddy field in France or a jungle clearing in the Pacific, it left a memory as vivid as any battle. A taste that reminded them how far from comfort, and how deep into war, they truly were. Liver loaf wasn't just disliked, it was despised. But in its own odd way, it became part of the shared story, a culinary low point that veterans could laugh about long after the fighting ended. Number 12, cheese spread and carrot jam. At first glance, cheese spread and carrot jam didn't sound like a bad deal, especially for soldiers starved of flavor, texture, and anything remotely close to a sandwich. But this curious combination, often tucked into K-rations as part of a breakfast or lunch unit, became one of the most confusing and unappetizing pairings many GIs ever encountered. The cheese spread came in a small, foil-lined tin, thick and pale orange, with a texture somewhere between wet putty and dried glue. It was salty, dense, and could barely be spread on the stiff army-issue crackers without snapping them in half. But the real head-scratcher was the carrot jam, sweet, bright orange, and made from boiled-down carrots mixed with sugar and pectin to create a kind of wartime marmalade. To soldiers expecting fruit preserves or even something vaguely familiar, the taste was jarring, sweet, vegetal, and strangely earthy. Some tried eating them separately, others, out of boredom or hunger, slathered both on crackers at once, creating a bizarre bite that was part salty cheese, part sweet root vegetable. Veterans would later joke that it was like someone tried to recreate a picnic using only what was left at the bottom of a pantry. The carrot jam was a product of wartime shortages and rationing on the home front. When fruit was scarce, the government turned to what it had, and carrots were abundant, cheap, and sweet enough to imitate the real thing. But no amount of nutritional justification could change the fact that this combo just didn't work. For some, it became a recurring memory, a moment of surreal culinary mismatch that summed up the odd improvisations of military life. And while neither component was outright revolting, together they symbolized what soldiers often faced at mealtime: meals that weren't built for taste, but for utility. Cheese spread and carrot jam may have fed the body, but they left the palate, and sometimes the morale, deeply confused. Number 13, powdered lemonade mix. In the scorching heat of the Pacific or the dry dust of North Africa, few things sounded more appealing to a weary soldier than an ice-cold glass of lemonade. And while the army couldn't provide fresh lemons, it did include powdered lemonade mix in many World War II ration kits, particularly in the K-Rations beverage packet. But what was meant to be a refreshing citrus drink turned out to be one of the most aggressively sour, painfully artificial concoctions many GIs ever swallowed. Packed in a small paper envelope, the powder was designed to be stirred into a canteen cup full of water. Unfortunately, clean water was rarely guaranteed, and ice was out of the question. The result was a lukewarm, chalky liquid that often settled into a gritty layer at the bottom of the cup. Its bright yellow color came from artificial dyes, and the flavor, more battery acid than lemonade, was so tart it made many soldiers wince. Still, it served a purpose. The bitterness encouraged hydration, masked the taste of iodine-treated water, and provided a quick dose of vitamin C to prevent scurvy. Some soldiers mixed it into coffee just to mask the harsh flavor, while others used it more creatively, like cleaning rust off mess kits or trading it to less picky comrades. Despite the sourness, there was something oddly comforting about the ritual of stirring that little packet into water. It gave a sense of normalcy, a brief illusion of civilian life. And for a few seconds, even the thought of lemonade, of porches, summer days, and peace, was enough to help them forget where they were. Powdered lemonade may not have been sweet, but it was familiar. And in a world that was constantly changing, unfamiliar, and dangerous, that alone gave it value. Whether loved, tolerated, or avoided, it became a small, bright-colored symbol of wartime life, tart, stubborn, and impossible to ignore. Number 14. Canned spaghetti with meat chunks. For soldiers far from home, few meals in their ration kit brought on more cautious optimism than canned spaghetti with meat chunks. It looked like something from a grocery store shelf, something your mom might have made on a lazy Sunday night. But once the can was opened and its contents spilled out into a mess kit, the illusion broke fast. The noodles were limp and lifeless, often overcooked to the point of disintegration, and suspended in a thick, bright red sauce that tasted more like ketchup and salt than anything Italian. And then there were the meat chunks, dense, chewy cubes of processed beef or pork that varied wildly in texture. Sometimes they were rubbery, other times they dissolved into a grainy paste that left a greasy film on the tongue. Still, for many GIs, it was better than the alternative. When served hot, rare as that was, it could at least feel like a real meal. In colder climates, soldiers even used the steaming cans to warm their hands before eating. Despite its many shortcomings, spaghetti with meat chunks offered a sense of familiarity, especially to those who had grown up eating canned goods during the Depression. It reminded them, however faintly, of normal life, of school lunches, of quiet dinners, of the kitchens they'd left behind. Some GIs would even try to dress it up by mixing in hot sauce, cheese spread, or bits of hardtack to give it more texture. But even with its faults, it remained one of the more tolerable options in a lineup of often inedible choices. It was a ration that pretended to be comforting, and for just a few minutes, if you closed your eyes and ignored the surroundings, it almost succeeded. It was a spoonful of home, canned and compromised, but still clinging to something familiar in a world that felt anything but. Number 15. Powdered eggs. Breakfast in the trenches rarely felt like breakfast at all, but for countless American soldiers during World War II, powdered eggs were a staple they simply couldn't escape. The idea seemed practical enough. Dehydrated egg powder, lightweight and shelf-stable, ready to be reconstituted with water and cooked into scrambled eggs or mixed into other dishes. But the reality was far less appetizing. Once rehydrated, these eggs took on a rubbery, chalky texture that many veterans described as something between sponge and styrofoam. The flavor was muted, often with a faint chemical aftertaste from the drying process. In the chaos of war, cooking conditions were less than ideal, often done over open flames or portable stoves with little control over heat, resulting in eggs that were frequently overcooked, dry, and almost impossible to chew. Soldiers joked that these powdered eggs could be used as building blocks or even as makeshift tools, thanks to their strange resilience. Yet, despite their unappealing taste and texture, powdered eggs packed an important nutritional punch, providing essential proteins and calories to keep men going during long days of battle. For many GIs, it was a meal they begrudgingly accepted as part of the package, better than nothing, but never a treat. And like so many wartime rations, powdered eggs left behind a complicated legacy. A symbol of wartime ingenuity and scarcity, but also of endurance, discomfort, and the strange camaraderie forged over shared meals that were as much about survival as sustenance. Veterans who lived through those days still recall powdered eggs with a mix of humor and disbelief, proof that even the simplest foods could leave a lasting impression during one of America's most challenging chapters. Number 16. Spam. When it comes to iconic wartime foods, few can rival the reputation of Spam, a canned meat product that became as much a symbol of World War II as soldiers' helmets and battle fatigues. Introduced to the military in large quantities, Spam was prized for its long shelf life, portability, and high protein content. Packed in a simple rectangular tin, this mystery meat was made from chopped pork shoulder and ham, processed and pressed into a dense, fatty loaf. For many GIs, Spam was a lifeline, a reliable source of calories when fresh meat was impossible to come by. But it was also the subject of endless jokes and imaginative nicknames: meatloaf in a can, the secret weapon, or simply Spammy. Its texture was soft and oily, and its flavor was salty, fatty, and sometimes overwhelmingly rich, especially when eaten cold straight from the can. Cooking Spam over a campfire or frying it up in a mess kit could transform it into something surprisingly tasty, crispy on the outside and tender inside, a rare treat on the front lines. Yet, even with its versatility, Spam was divisive. Some soldiers loved it, trading other rations just to get a can or two. Others found its greasy taste and smell cloying and inescapable. In the Pacific Theater especially, where fresh meat was scarce, Spam became a staple, not just for American troops but for local populations as well, who incorporated it into their own dishes long after the war ended. It was a food born from necessity, but one that left a lasting cultural legacy. Spam wasn't just a canned meat. It was a reminder of wartime resourcefulness and resilience, a strange comfort food that could unite hungry soldiers in mess halls or remind them of home with every salty bite. Number 17. Ration Fruit Bar. In the midst of war, small comforts often meant the most, and for many American soldiers, the Ration Fruit Bar was a tiny but memorable treat tucked inside their daily meal kits. Unlike the heavy canned meats or salty crackers, this compact bar was designed to provide a quick burst of energy and a touch of sweetness during long marches or intense combat. Made from a mix of dehydrated fruits, sugar, and cereal grains, the bar had a dense, chewy texture that could sometimes border on gritty, but its fruity tang was a welcome contrast to the often bland and salty main courses. These bars weren't just snacks, they were morale boosters, reminding soldiers of home and simpler times. The fruit bar's origins trace back to early attempts to create portable, non-perishable foods that could withstand the harsh conditions of battlefields without refrigeration. Unlike fresh fruit, which was impossible to carry, these bars packed essential vitamins and calories in a tiny, durable package. Soldiers learned to stash them carefully, savoring each bite like a secret treasure when food ran low or fatigue set in. Over time, the Ration Fruit Bar became more than just ration filler. It was a symbol of innovation and hope, proof that even in the darkest moments, small moments of sweetness could survive. Though it lacked the glamour of fresh fruit or homemade desserts, the fruit bar quietly did its job, fueling bodies, uplifting spirits, and carving a small space for normalcy amid the chaos of war. Number 18. Sweetened canned corn. For many soldiers during World War II, the sight of sweetened canned corn might have brought a rare flicker of warmth to their otherwise monotonous meals. Packaged in small tins and included in various ration kits, this sweet corn was a curious addition. A vegetable, yes, but one soaked in syrupy sweetness that made it feel more like a dessert than a side dish. On the battlefields where fresh produce was a luxury, sweetened canned corn offered a taste of something familiar, a link to home kitchens and family dinners. Its bright yellow kernels, soft and sticky, were easy to eat without much preparation, making it a convenient pick-me-up during long days on the move. Yet, the sugary syrup sometimes clashed with the other savory or salty components of rations, creating strange flavor combinations that soldiers either tolerated or outright avoided. The sweetened canned corn wasn't just about nutrition, it was a morale booster, a reminder that even in war, a touch of sweetness could persist. For many veterans, that sticky corn became a symbol of resilience, a small pleasure amidst the hardships of combat. It was never a favorite, but it was there when fresh vegetables were not, a dependable if imperfect, companion on the long road from battlefield to home. Number 19. Canned beans with pork. Few meals in the World War II ration lineup offered the hearty, familiar comfort that canned beans with pork provided to American soldiers spread across distant battlefields. This simple combination, soft, stewed beans mingling with small chunks of salted pork, was a nod to the rustic, down-home cooking many troops grew up with in kitchens back home. Packed in sturdy tins, the dish was designed to be filling and calorie-dense, supplying much-needed energy for long marches and grueling patrols. The beans, usually navy or pinto, were slow-cooked to a mushy tenderness, absorbing the smoky, salty flavors from the pork fat, creating a warming, if somewhat plain, stew. While not glamorous, this ration brought a measure of comfort, especially in cold or damp conditions when something warm and filling was a true blessing. The smell of beans and pork simmering over a campfire or heated on a portable stove became a familiar scent in foxholes and bivouacs. Soldiers often compared the dish to the beans and cornbread, or beans and ham, they'd eaten growing up, making it one of the few reminders of normalcy in an otherwise foreign and dangerous environment. At times, the meal was all that stood between exhaustion and hope, reminding troops that even in war, some tastes, and the memories they evoked, could endure. Though simple and utilitarian, canned beans with pork carried with it a cultural history that tied soldiers to the heart of American home cooking, giving them a small but significant taste of familiarity far from home. Number 20. Wartime canned peaches. In the harsh and unpredictable world of World War II rations, canned peaches offered soldiers a rare, sweet taste of normal life, bright, soft, and dripping with syrup. Packaged carefully to survive long journeys and rough conditions, these peaches were more than just fruit. They were a brief escape, a reminder of summer afternoons, family picnics, and simpler times left far behind. Though nothing compared to biting into a fresh, juicy peach, these preserved slices carried the warmth of home in their sticky sweetness. For troops stationed in cold or dusty outposts, opening a can of peaches was like opening a tiny window to comfort. The syrup, thick and sugary, often made the peaches feel more like candy than fruit, but it was a welcome indulgence amid the bland and salty rations that made up most meals. Sometimes eaten alone, other times mixed into oatmeal or even sprinkled over crackers, canned peaches were a flexible treat that soldiers savored whenever the chance arose. Yet, their very sweetness also held a bittersweet truth. These preserved fruits were a product of wartime rationing and necessity, reminders of shortages on the home front and the sacrifices being made on all sides. Still, for many veterans, the taste of canned peaches was a small, sweet memory, a reminder that even in the darkest times, a touch of sweetness could survive. Number 21. Dried potato flakes. Dried potato flakes might not sound like much, but for American soldiers during World War II, this unassuming ration was a surprisingly vital part of their meals. Made by dehydrating cooked potatoes and grinding them into a powder, these flakes were lightweight, compact, and easy to rehydrate with water or broth, transforming into a soft, mashed potato-like dish in minutes. In an era when fresh produce was nearly impossible to transport and store on the front lines, dried potato flakes offered a semblance of the comforting, familiar starch that many soldiers missed deeply. The flakes could be mixed with seasoning or melted butter when available, but often they were eaten plain, a bland but filling side that helped round out the meal. While they lacked the creamy texture of freshly mashed potatoes, their ability to quickly provide calories and bulk made them a popular ration item, especially during cold weather when soldiers craved something warm and hearty. Beyond their practicality, dried potato flakes carried a nostalgic weight. For many troops, they evoked memories of family dinners, holiday feasts, and home-cooked meals far away from the battlefields. Yet, as with many ration foods, they were a double-edged sword, easy to prepare but sometimes gritty or pasty if not handled properly, leading to mixed feelings among soldiers. Still, dried potato flakes endured as a reminder that even in the most challenging circumstances, a touch of home could be preserved and shared through the simplest foods. Number 22. Canned Vienna sausages. Small, soft, and often overlooked, canned Vienna sausages were a humble yet ubiquitous presence in many World War II ration packs. These tiny meat cylinders, packed tightly in a small can and preserved in a salty brine, offered soldiers a quick protein boost without the need for cooking, which made them particularly valuable during fast-paced operations or in the field when fire was scarce. Though not exactly gourmet fare, their mild flavor and tender texture made them one of the more approachable canned meats in the often challenging array of military rations. Soldiers learned to eat them straight from the can, or sometimes paired them with crackers or cheese spread for a makeshift snack. However, Vienna sausages had their share of detractors. Some found their flavor too bland, while others complained about the salty aftertaste and the slippery texture that could be off-putting. Despite this, their convenience was undeniable, and they became a staple for many troops who valued anything that required no preparation and little cleanup. Interestingly, Vienna sausages also gained a reputation beyond the battlefield, becoming popular with civilians during the war years due to their long shelf life and affordability. In many ways, these small sausages symbolized wartime practicality, unpretentious, enduring, and a little bit strange. They weren't fancy, but they helped fill stomachs, boost morale, and keep soldiers going one tiny sausage at a time. Number 23. Canned cheese spread. Canned cheese spread might not sound like the pinnacle of culinary delight, but for American soldiers during World War II, it was a surprisingly beloved ration component. Packaged in small tins, this creamy, processed cheese was designed to be shelf-stable and easy to spread on the ever-present army crackers. Its smooth, slightly salty flavor offered a welcome break from the often dry and bland staples of military rations. Many soldiers found comfort in the simple act of spreading cheese on a cracker, something that felt a little like home amid the chaos of war. Though the texture was somewhat artificial, almost velvety, the cheese spread was surprisingly versatile. It could be eaten alone, mixed into other ration items, or even melted slightly to create a warm snack. The tins themselves became iconic, sometimes repurposed for storing small personal items or as makeshift containers. For some troops, cheese spread was one of the few flavorful parts of their meals, a small indulgence that broke the monotony of canned meats and hardtack. Its presence in rations also reflected wartime food technology innovations, how manufacturers learned to create foods that could survive long storage, transportation, and extreme conditions without spoiling. While not everyone loved it, some found it too salty or artificial. The canned cheese spread endures as a nostalgic reminder of the ingenuity and compromises that shaped soldier sustenance during the war. It was more than just a spread. It was a little slice of comfort and normalcy, wrapped in a tin. Number 24. Chocolate bars. Few foods during World War II carried the emotional weight and simple joy that chocolate bars did for American soldiers. These small, dense bars of sweet cocoa were more than just treats. They were morale boosters, symbols of home, and little pockets of comfort amid the chaos of war. Included in various rations, such as the Deer Ration bar, chocolate was designed to be hardy enough to withstand heat and rough handling, sometimes resulting in a slightly chalky texture that didn't quite match the rich candy bars soldiers remembered from civilian life. But even with these imperfections, the taste of chocolate offered a brief escape, a reminder of birthday parties, holidays, and simpler pleasures. Soldiers treasured their chocolate bars, often trading or saving them for moments when a morale lift was desperately needed. In the grueling environments of jungles, deserts, and frozen frontlines, that small sweetness could be a powerful antidote to homesickness and fatigue. The government even commissioned special energy chocolate bars to provide extra calories during strenuous operations, underscoring the importance of chocolate beyond mere indulgence. For many veterans, the memory of unwrapping a chocolate bar during the war remains vivid, a fleeting moment of joy, a taste of normalcy, and a symbol of resilience. In the story of wartime food, chocolate bars stand out as small but mighty heroes, reminding us that sometimes the sweetest things can carry the heaviest meaning. Number 25. Coffee. For American soldiers during World War II, coffee was much more than a morning ritual. It was a lifeline, a comfort, and a moment of normalcy amid the unpredictable chaos of war. Though fresh coffee was a luxury rarely afforded on the front lines, the military provided instant or powdered coffee in their rations, ensuring that troops could brew a quick cup wherever they were. The bitter, sometimes weak brew was often a far cry from the rich, aromatic coffee enjoyed back home, but its warmth and caffeine kick were invaluable. Coffee fueled countless long nights on watch, early morning marches, and tense moments in foxholes, helping soldiers stay alert and connected to a sense of routine. Beyond its practical benefits, coffee became a social ritual, a reason to gather, share stories, and find brief solace amid the hardships of battle. Many veterans recall how the act of brewing and sipping coffee, even under the most difficult conditions, brought a fleeting feeling of peace and camaraderie. In the often harsh and unfamiliar environments where soldiers found themselves, a cup of coffee was a small anchor to home, tradition, and hope. Though simple, this humble beverage carried profound significance, reminding troops that even in the darkest times, a warm cup could provide comfort, connection, and strength to carry on.